Community Interactive, The Arts, a conversation on art and culture in Southern Arizona, was made possible by the generous support of the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona, the Community Service Grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the members of Arizona Public Media.
Driving just on the interstate, like you would never guess that Tucson has all this. Like Tucson from the interstate looks boring. So boring.
You can't get bored here. I mean, you got to be really not paying attention or completely checked out.
I would say that it's the most unique city in regards to arts and culture that I've ever visited or been a part of.
There is a sound of Tucson, and to me, it's not necessarily the style of music, it's that grit. It's that strong desire, that passion, and that grit that comes from, I think, the desert.
The arts, things that people put under the umbrella of culture, are the things that define us as human beings, and we've got to spend some time making sure that we preserve that.
Even for the individual who feels that they don't go to a movie, they don't go to a symphony, they don't engage in any artistic practice, they are profoundly touched by the infrastructure that the arts bring to this community, the economic dollars that come into this community, the vibe, I guess you can say, that makes this community livable.
Live from the historic Temple of Music and Art in downtown Tucson, Arizona Public Media and the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona present Community Interactive, The Arts, a conversation on art and culture in Southern Arizona. Please welcome tonight's moderator, Chief Arts Correspondent for the PBS NewsHour, Jeffrey Brown.
Good evening. Good evening, and thank you. I'm thrilled to be here in Tucson and in this gorgeous building, the Temple of Music and Art. That is my kind of temple. It was built in 1927. It's home to the Arizona Theater Company, which helps explain, as you may have noticed, why I am sitting here in the middle of an Irish farmhouse kitchen. ATC's current production is John Patrick Shanley's Outside Mullingar, and they have graciously offered the use of the stage and set for tonight's conversation. So, Tucson via Ireland, why not? In my life at the NewsHour, I have done many things, talked to many people, traveled to many places, but no doubt most exciting, stimulating, and memorable to me is my work covering the arts, talking with writers, musicians, actors, and other artists of all kinds about the inspiration, personal experience, process, and the business of making a living being creative. I am also a poet with a book titled The News from a few years back. I love to write, and it has been really wonderful to go into the world as a writer myself, but I did learn one extremely important lesson from that. I'm glad I don't have to make a living from poetry. Perhaps some of you know that feeling. Tonight, we will have conversations touching on the arts in our lives. I hope they will be engaging and entertaining. Our goal is that they address problems and opportunities, the good and bad, and spark action toward bettering this community. And you can be involved. Normally, this is when we tell everyone to turn off their cell phones, but tonight I'm going to ask you to take out your phones now and make sure they are on. This is odd. Yes, it's odd to me. Please do not do this when sitting next to me at a movie or play. But please turn the ringers off. So this is the interactive part of Community Interactive, and throughout the evening, we will ask you to respond to a few polls, and we'll present the results live on screen. You can also submit your own questions for tonight's panelists. It's easy to do, whether you are here in the audience or watching from home. Just follow these simple steps.
Welcome to Community Interactive, The Arts, a conversation on art and culture in Southern Arizona. Here's how you can join the conversation tonight. Using your mobile device, go to slido.com. That's SLIDO.com. Once on the page, enter The Arts. That's THEARTS, all one word, all lowercase. Now you're all set to take part and answer questions tonight. Thank you for participating.
You should be seeing the first poll question on your phone. It's also here on the screen. You may have already answered this, but if not, do so now. Select your answer, yes or no, and as you do, you can see the live results. Here's the poll question. Are you employed in a creative industry? Yes or no? I hear a yes. Retail jobs that support creative projects count. So do jobs in advertising, publishing, catering, audio engineering, and architecture. Other jobs included in creative industries are electricians, welders, metal workers, and other tradespersons involved in public art installations and set building. So think again. Are you employed in the creative industry? You can change your answer now if you would like. Okay, let's get started with a basic question. Why do the arts matter? Our production team asked members of your community, and here's what they said.
For the most part, you can go pretty much anywhere in Tucson and feel comfortable and feel at home and feel like you belong.
This city is so culturally rich, not just visual arts, but performing arts, and the music scene keeps getting better and better. We're on a big, big upswing right now.
It's full of moxie because there aren't a lot of jobs. It's a tough town to survive in. Lots of things die in the desert, but everyone survives. And it's that feeling of survival and the Old West, I think, coming together.
We're highly border influenced here in Tucson, and I think you see that in everything, in the murals, and the food, and artists.
The arts are critical to learning for many reasons. They embrace and engage students academically, more actively, so that they improve, particularly what we studied, mathematics and language arts.
Collectively, it's an enormous amount of income that's provided by the cultural industry into the city of Tucson.
Do I think the arts deserve and need more resources? Yes.
Is it difficult to find funding? Yes.
Yes, I think it's important for there to be funding for the arts, and we could use more. But I think some of that lack of funding is what has made the drive even stronger.
The people that are doing like extra in this town aren't waiting around for funding because we know that we're not going to get that.
We don't need your funding. We'll take it, and we're going to do amazing things with it, but we're good on our own.
You start taking that away, and it's an economic problem. People stop coming here.
So Arizona, without question, falls near the very bottom of funding. The way that the systems work in the state of Arizona, thousands of artists and arts organizations share no more than $1.5 million nearly at the state level.
It's funny to look out at a live audience and see everybody on their phones, and my first instinct is, what the hell are you doing, you know? But you're doing what I told you. It's very sweet. Let's see how you answered the first poll question. Are you employed in a creative industry? Yes or no? Now, where's my results here? Let's see. 52% said yes, 48% said no. So it's a good division here in the audience. Well, anyway, those of you who are involved in this will know a lot of the issues and be familiar with the kinds of things we're going to talk to, and all of you will no doubt be interested. So let's start with our first panel. With me to discuss the impact of creativity, Randy Dorman is former president of Tucson's Museum of Contemporary Art and currently chairwoman of the Downtown Tucson Partnership. Mark David Penate is actor, director, musician, and educator. He's the producing artistic director of the Borderlands Theater. And Fletcher McCusker, a third-generation Tucsonan, recognized by many as the catalyst for Tucson's revitalized downtown.
Yay!
All right, thank you all for being here. I want to start with a big first question for you, Randy. Okay. When you think of a great art city, right, what defines it? What does it have to have?
I think the first thing is it has to have passion and character. And Tucson has that in abundance. You need the creative spirit. You need places where people can connect and gather. I think that's why downtown has been so important, in particular to the arts. You need those random interactions to spark the creative ideas, both for the arts and for economic development.
Mm-hmm. Mark?
I think you need a willing audience. I mean, I come from theater, but there's audiences for all types of art. And I find that folks out here are very willing to take risks, to try new things. And I think that's really important for a good art scene.
And Fletcher?
In 2010, if you were here, most of our downtown would have been boarded up. And many of us sat around and thought about what cities could we emulate. And they were places like Austin, Texas, or Portland, or San Diego. Those were reachable. It wasn't LA or New York. We never thought we'd be New Orleans. But we thought two things would attract people to our downtown environment: food and music.
Food and music.
Food and music.
Because?
It creates a reason to go someplace where there's no other reason to go there.
Yeah. Did it have to be good food or good music?
We were hopeful that it would be good food, and we got lucky in that regard, and that we deliberately tried to make sure the music was good, and we've excelled in the latter.
And you've done pretty well with the food too, right? Because I
Yes.
heard about the UNESCO.
City of
that's pretty good.
Gastronomy, right?
Indeed, we should all celebrate. We're the only city in North America that's been designated as the city of gastronomy.
Right.
So, well, so this all sounds good, but I want to take you back to when you first came here. Not to put words in your mouth, but I will, because we talked about this a little bit. You came from
I came
New York,
from New York City.
and what did you find here?
Well, I moved from Manhattan to downtown Tucson in at the end of 2001. And my husband is a native Tucsonan, Rob Paulus. And when we were dating, we would drive down Congress Street here, and I'd be like, what is wrong with these people? Why are these buildings boarded up? Why is nothing happening? But we moved downtown. We very quickly realized that we wanted to help revitalize it. It was such a great asset, and I couldn't imagine an East Side strip mall as the cultural center of Tucson. So we just dug in it pretty much as soon as I got here.
Fletcher, you were here from here, but moved away and came back. What did you find?
I think a lot of people that grow up in Tucson think everything else looks better. Yeah, and I did. I went to high school, college here, and moved away. I was gone for 22 years. And when I came back, as a kid in the 50s, downtown was everything. I was a member of the Mickey Mouse Club at the Fox Theater. It's where you went to shop and where you went to eat. And when I reintroduced my wife to all that when we moved back, it literally, as Randy suggested, was boarded up. Every single building downtown, every theater, the hotels had been abandoned for the suburban malls. And it was depressing, but I really didn't have a reason to engage. So that was 1996, and it really wasn't until 2010 that I found myself engaged in all things downtown.
So, we heard on that video, Mark, the desert is a tough place, right? Mm-hmm. You came here from the outside. In thinking about what you found, I want you to tell me how tough a place it was and is, actually.
Well, it's tough in that, unlike a city like Phoenix or other bigger cities, there's not a lot of companies, a lot of industry. There's not a lot of money. I mean, overall, Tucson's a relatively poor city. The rates of poverty are pretty high. So that makes it hard. Makes it hard to find funders, donors, folks that willing to pay for art, right? And I think there's also, there's a culture, there's an education around art going, and from other places, people understand that it costs money. I think people, there's making big generalizations, but I think folks love art. And I think not everybody, Randy was saying this earlier, not everybody wants to pay for it.
Right.
And we've found that. So that, I think that's been the biggest challenge. I think that there's incredible stories here. There's, like I said, very willing people that are game for almost anything. Great weather for 9 months out of the year.
Yeah.
So a lot of good ingredients, but that financial component is difficult.
So for you, how do you fund Borderlands? Is it really a grant-to-grant situation?
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
We do really well with grants. I think there's the three sort of legs: earned income, individual donations, and then federal, grants, whether government or foundation grants. We have become very good at creating very sexy projects that are multi-layered with all these different non-arts partners, cross-sector partnerships, and dealing multi-generationally. A lot of things which I probably will go into in the third panel I'm on. But and so those have worked really well, and we've I'd say our track record's 80-90% on the grants that we write. But those don't pay for the administrative overhead costs. Those are just for projects.
You face the same kind of thing, right?
Raising money here is so hard.
Yeah.
It's
to the point where MoCA almost closed.
Oh, yeah, so we had a teeny budget. Museum of Contemporary Art's about 20 years old. I joined the board 11 years ago. It's like my baby. I love it. And but we had a teeny budget. We kept trying to raise money and trying to raise money. We had one board meeting where we were like, we have no money. We might have to close. We were heartbroken. And then we realized it was going to cost about $25,000 to close. And we didn't have
choose your poison, right?
We didn't have enough money to close. And so we just looked at each other and I said, okay, let's put payroll on my credit card. Don't tell my husband. Let's figure out what we're going to do. And we just kept, you need passion, you need tenacity. You need angels, like Fletcher was our angel at that point, and
he looks like an
angel. He is, right? I know, with the wings and everything. But it takes, it takes a lot to make these institutions work in this community. This community loves the arts, but there's not a lot of money. Yeah. There's not state funding. There's very little.
There isn't. The business community. Well, you've seen that. The business community here, in terms of art support.
Our art support comes from private citizens. Many of them are corporate. Right. Many of them are individual. And I think the interesting irony of Tucson is we've become a top 5 destination for the arts without any government money. And I think that's inspirational to those of us that got involved early. Every week, every month, you see somebody engage in something new, creative, artistic, and they find money. Somehow they all find money. And it's not coming from the city, the state, or the federal government. So, Tucson is a homegrown arts town. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I think you have deeper diversity and deeper commitment. And, we pay as we go. The environments that we've created now have some commercial success. The restaurants, the theaters have never done better. The concerts are sold out. But for a while there, we were all looking at each other, wondering how you're going to make the next payroll.
We've got a video I want to show because it digs in at some of the data. Researchers from the MAP Dashboard Project at the University of Arizona's Eller College of Management have just concluded a study of what it calls Tucson's creative class. So let's take a look at what they found.
What kind of impact do the arts have on Tucson's economy? Events centered around the arts can mean millions for Tucson's fast-growing tourism industry, and those events can bring paying Tucsonans out in the thousands. But the major impact of the arts goes beyond that. It lays the groundwork for a part of the economy known as the creative class.
What the creative class does is generate new ideas, new technologies, and new expressions. And these new things are part of the innovative process in the local economy that really drives local growth.
Economist Richard Florida split the creative class into two groups: the super creative core, which ranges from artists to engineers, and creative professionals such as lawyers and doctors.
Now, these jobs are relatively high paying compared to the average for all occupations in Tucson. They pay about $71,000 per year.
For comparison, the average wage in Tucson is around $40,000 a year. Nearly 1/4 of local jobs are in the creative class, a figure that doesn't fare well when compared to other cities.
Tucson is a bit behind the national average in terms of how those jobs stack up nationally, and we rank about 11th in terms of these arts-type jobs compared to the other western metropolitan areas that we track.
The wages paid to Tucson's creative class are also below the national average, and while creative occupations have grown as America recovers from the Great Recession, the same cannot be said of Tucson's. Our share of creative occupations has fallen since 2011. The difference in share of jobs in those who create and innovate, the super creative core, is even more stark. So how can a city build up its creative class?
Supporting the arts is one way to help grow these creative class type jobs, and just generally supporting education is another way to encourage the growth in these innovative sectors.
An environment enriched by art can help create minds that think outside the box. And a vibrant arts community could just as easily make Tucson the birthplace of the next Bill Gates as it could the next Rembrandt.
That's what drives innovation, and it's really innovation that drives growth in jobs, income, and ultimately our overall economic prosperity.
For more on this research and the MAP project, visit the website at mapaz-dashboard.arizona.edu.
So back with our panel, if you think about that and the creative class here, I want to ask a question that just came from our audience on Slido, and thank you for that, so keep them coming if you'd like. Mark, this is for you, with the exception, well, all of you, with the exception of borderlands, Tucson audiences are largely white, older, and wealthy. Is programming the problem, or is there something else that should be done? And this goes to both programming and fundraising. How do you keep a theater going? What do you see?
I often ask myself, as far as programming, I mean, we have very diverse programming, but I don't know, and it's celebrated in many ways, and certainly funders love it, grant funders love it. But I don't know if, individual donors like what we do. I don't know. I mean, I haven't went out there and polled anybody, but we do have people that come to our shows. They're like teachers, or they're retired and they were humanitarian workers. We get a lot of college students because their professors assign our plays. So we have these relationships, but we definitely don't have the kind of audience that ATC has, or even the Rogue. Some of the other theater companies in town, and I feel like that's kind of where the donors are. They're not necessarily. I mean, we have people. Our donors donate $20, $50. If we're lucky, someone donates $500. That's we have a big party if somebody does that. So
have you met Fletcher, by the way?
I have not. So I think we're doing this great innovative work, very diverse work, but I don't know if it's paying off in dollars.
Yeah, Randy, how do you see this?
Well, at the Museum of Contemporary Art, our demographic is really varied, so it doesn't fall into that category. And we try to program for a really wide demographic as well. I do notice when I go to the symphony, for example, that it does match that demographic much more, and I think are better funded than we are. We have to do inspirational programming. When I got here, I felt that the arts community was playing it a little safe. I think right now is the most exciting time since I've been here to be involved in the arts.
Safe meaning, safe in the programming, you mean?
In the programming. Our mission at MOGA is to inspire new ways of thinking, and that's what I think we all should be doing. I mean, that's really what's going to move Tucson forward. There's an emotional and inspirational aspect. There's an economic development aspect to that as well. And so you can't play to your donors. You have to play to what's going to inspire the community and hope that you can still find enough donors so that you can keep your mission going.
I've got another question from the audience for Fletcher. I'll ask you, how can we promote Tucson nationally and internationally as an arts destination? So this, I mean, you get all this stuff going on the ground, and then you need to let the world know. You were talking about models such as Austin, for example. How do you promote Tucson as someplace unique, but also that kind of model?
It's really a word of mouth thing, and we're beginning to see that kind of reputation extend beyond us. Tucson was recently ranked the 7th music city in the U.S., right behind Austin. We're seeing a lot of inbound press. The city of gastronomy was a huge headline for us, and you're beginning to see foodies travel to Tucson to do nothing but eat. So we're gaining ground in that, and a lot of it is what we do with our creative time. The symphony is not full, the ballet is not full, the opera is generally not full. This theater rarely sells out. So it's an obligation on all of us, A, to support our arts so that they thrive, but then tell everybody you can that Tucson is hip, hot. Come on down, see what it's about.
If I could just add, there's someone from Denver and someone from Mason, so they'll speak more expertly on this. But for example, sometimes it's the way you package it as a community. In Dallas, they realized that they had an economic development challenge because companies were not moving there. They did not have a well-developed arts environment, and they created a whole arts district with various sources of funding, but it was a district, it was promoted as a district, it was promoted holistically, all the businesses donated to it. There's an anecdote that some big business person was asked to donate like $10 million to build a new symphony hall, and he said, I'll donate the $10 million if I don't have to go. But he understood the importance to that city of building something like that. And corporate headquarters, corporate leaders, they're looking for a healthy arts community. And so I think we could do a much better job of supporting it and packaging it.
I mean, in thinking about building your theater, I assume you have to sort of brand your theater to this community. Do you think also about outside models or reaching?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, we've had a lot of success with sort of these like history-based, site-specific, sort of multi-partner projects that has really come from a lot of ideas outside of Tucson that I brought when I came here, but that has really gotten a lot of national attention. And we've had like Trinity Rep came and visited us to see what we're doing. Two Rivers Theater in New Jersey came and visited us last summer. So we have a lot of interest, the methods that we're using, and that's been really, really great.
Do you have just a final word here?
We're seeing some of that diversity in our downtown. The Rialto is one of the most active booked indoor concert venues now in the country. If you look at its schedule and its acts, it's very diverse. The Fox has become a very diverse venue, from acoustic artists like Harlem Gospel Choir to country to hard rock to theater and ballet. And you see those people mingling together in the street with the kind of millennials that want to be urban. So we have 2,000 apartments going up in our downtown core. The occupants of those have surprised a lot of us. Over half of them are people my age. who have given up their yard and garden and pool and landscaping challenges to move to an urban environment where they can walk to the theater and concerts. So we're seeing that downtown, but I don't know that anyone has a deliberate strategy to diversify our audience base.
I was just wondering, though, because you mentioned other cities. I mean, we've all had the experience of, I mean, I know people in Austin will say, I don't like Austin anymore. Or, my Austin isn't Austin anymore, right? And the gentrification and changes to that a place changes so much that it loses some of its character. You're not worried about that yet?
We have a motto, but it's not repeatable.
What do you mean? You mean on public television?
Yes.
If you whisper it, could we?
No, it's not repeatable.
Are you worried at all about? You're not at that point of worrying about such.
We're not at that point. So you have to be cognizant of the benefits and hazards of gentrification.
Yeah.
Tucson did not have a sustainable model. The way that we were going, people were leaving. It was going downhill, it wasn't going uphill. And so we needed to create the momentum. And at the Downtown Tucson Partnership, we view kind of where we are in our downtown about maybe a third of the way of where we want to be. So we just did a new strategic plan because we want to actually plan the next 2/3, what happens, what we want. The arts are a part of it. A lot of diversity, living. It's going to be wonderful, and we're creating the programs to make that happen. So we're not worried about that, but we're cognizant of it.
Yeah.
And also not losing the rich history that's here.
Yeah.
It's so deep and beautiful. And it's in our downtown. Part of it was destroyed in our downtown, but part of it still exists. When you spend time here, you can't miss just the depth of our heritage. And I think the arts celebrate that really well. In downtown, we're trying to represent that well also.
All right. Let's leave it right there for this panel. Fletcher McCusker, Randy Dorman, Mark David Panate, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thanks.
Now, please get out your phones again. We have a new poll we'd like you to take. Here's the question this time. What prevents you from experiencing more arts and culture in southern Arizona? Cost, location, inconvenient times or scheduling conflicts, unable to find information or events, or nothing interests you. We're going to be really depressed if you all choose number 5. Please choose your answer and hit submit. And remember, you can send me questions by clicking on question on the Slido page and typing it in. I'm going to probably wake up in the middle of the night saying Slido to myself. We will be back here on stage in just a few minutes to talk with 2 people who have helped their cities develop into thriving, vibrant, and well-supported arts communities. But first, let's go back to the courtyard and to Mark McLemore, host of AZPM's Arizona Spotlight. Mark?
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. This has been an exciting evening to hear about these ideas and the future possibilities for art in the Tucson community. Joining us now once again is going to be from the Fred Fox School of Music. We have the school graduate brass quintet, and they will be playing a selection from Der Bankelsangerlieder. Thank you.
A lack of permanent funding has created no sustainability in the arts sector. If organizations are constantly required to be relying on individual donations and no sustained revenue, there's no ability for us to look to the future, building a future. What a lot of other states and communities have done is they've built in permanent funding streams at the local level. Southern Arizona in particular has not done that.
We could talk a lot about why do we have a budget deficit, but if you build in that we're not going to ignore the importance of the arts in our community, then you work around that and you make that a priority. That I don't think happens the way it should in this state at all, not at all.
If you just look at it purely from an economic point of view, it's a huge mistake to cut the arts, especially in a smaller market like Tucson, because the arts are a big draw here. We know that.
I think it's good for us to understand what communities our size are doing, to see if there's some things we can learn from them in terms of how they might be funding their arts and culture.
One thing that I've been trying to do myself to make what I'm creating different is actually traveling outside of Tucson to see what other places are doing. I think bigger changes can happen if we reach out.
Instead of waiting for our elected officials to see the value, we need to start doing the work to build the value underneath it. And what they've been able to do in communities like Toledo is truly build sustainable funding for the arts, because it wasn't them trying to convince their elected officials that this is valuable, is them doing the work to where then the elected officials said, we can't not be doing work with you.
Who are you all laughing at? What are you all laughing at? Picasso? Yeah. Are we allowed to cite him anymore in the Me Too moment? I wonder. Well, before we... Before we meet our next panel, let's look at how you answered this poll. 49% chose this is what prevents you from experiencing more arts and culture. 49% chose inconvenient time scheduling conflicts, and then 36% cost. 21% unable to find information or events, 15% location, just 3% nothing interests you. That's the correct answer. I mean, the correct percentage. But the conflicts, I think that's the one we all are most familiar with, right? Busy schedules and what you're able to get to. But the cost one is interesting, that it's that high, 36%. Let's continue now with our next panel. With me now are two women whose ideas we might want to consider copying or stealing, as with Picasso or Steve Jobs. So Cindy Ornstein is Director of Arts and Culture for the City of Mesa, Arizona, and Deborah Jordy is a board member and treasurer for Americans for the Arts and Executive Director of the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District in Denver, Colorado. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me ask you first, Cindy, because you came to Mesa from elsewhere. So what was the situation you arrived into, and what did you feel you had to grapple with?
Well, it was very interesting because Mesa, Arizona is a very special city that had tried and then failed and then tried again and succeeded in holding a public referendum for a quality of life sales tax to build an art center. And they had done so, and they had built a truly magnificent art center, the largest multidisciplinary art center in the Southwest. And that was part of what motivated me to come, a city where the people would vote a sales tax on themselves to build an art center really made a statement to me.
You knew you were going to have some support in the community.
Yes, and it showed quite the vision, because this was an organization that had previously been in a small, old elementary school and had grown and was bursting at the seams, but this was a community that had the vision to dream big and build something really substantial. And yet, that was in a sleepy downtown, a very small downtown for the size of our community, which is close to 500,000, just slightly smaller than Tucson. And the downtown really had such good bones. It had such fantastic potential. And Mesa Arts Center was thriving, but a lot of people would come to the Mesa Arts Center and then go home.
Yeah.
And the whole question was, how do we really change the nature of the downtown, especially because 5 years later from when I arrived, we knew light rail was arriving from Phoenix through Tempe. It was going to come through downtown. What were people going to find when they got off the light rail?
Yeah. Okay, so before we get to your solutions, let me bring in Deborah. First thing I want to ask you in the situation in Denver is scientific and cultural facilities.
It's a mouthful.
That is a mouthful. It's a
SCFD.
funny sort of pairing. What does it mean?
We have no facilities. So the SCFD,
Oh, you have no
we have no
facilities.
facilities, no. We fund all of the cultural organizations in the area. The SCFD is a 7-county special taxing district. The footprint is the size of Delaware and Rhode Island put together. And last year we funded $56 million to just around 275 organizations. This has been in existence for 30 years, coming up in November.
It's very, yeah. So, just picking up off some of the things we heard in the first panel, when you think about the core constituencies, right, the advocates for the kind of things you want to do, who do you look to? Who do you have to bring in to get things done to make this an arts city?
It's a building process. You have to have strong leadership at a state level, the governor, the mayors. In our case, there are many mayors, city councils. So there's a strong political piece. The business community is extremely important, the chambers, business leaders, trustees of organizations. And then really it's how you build and mount a campaign that people know. And what's so important about the SCFD is it's access for all. You know, we are all about, and the organizations receive this money to provide services and to enlighten and enhance and educate the public. So it's a real collaborative effort, both in terms of business sectors, the arts community, and elected officials.
Assume you have, Denver is a big city. It has all kinds of social issues and problems, right? Yeah. So are you competing for similar dollars? And what's the...
we just passed it. It passed initially in 2018, and we've authorized 3 times since, most recently in 2016. So we are good to go until 2030.
Yeah.
But all that said, it never stops. I'm always thinking about the next 10 years, making sure that people know that the SCFD provides the funding to the organization so that the public really can use our facilities.
Yeah. So, Cindy, you said that the public was supporting with tax dollars, but then what did you have to do to pull it all together? The same sort of questions about the core.
So the tax dollars built the Art Center. My department also has 2 other museums, and the city funds about half of our budget. So the City of Mesa's Arts and Culture Department is a budget of about $15 million a year. The rest is earned and contributed, but we were not in a position where the city was going to be really adding to those dollars, and there had been cuts during the recession. So what we really focused on was the need to create a sense of engagement, buy-in, and ownership from the large populace, not only in Mesa, but the region. And so we really focused on, in terms of long-term support, needing to grow the personal experience and value in the community of these assets, and the engagement in people being participants in making the community what they wanted it to be as a creative community. So our efforts have been very heavily focused on building those community engagement opportunities and the ways that people can recognize that this is something they don't want to live without, because politically, obviously, it's very important that the elected officials hear from their constituencies that this is something they want to see continue to be funded.
And they do hear that. You make sure.
We feel it's been growing and really bubbling up in a fantastic, very organic way. We have several initiatives that have worked hard to sort of gather the arts activists and empower them with both resources and collaborative opportunities. But what we see is that after 7 years, people are starting to recognize that the vibrancy that they experience that is starting to attract some new businesses
Yeah.
is very much associated with arts activity.
Yeah. Let me ask, Deborah, there's a question here from the audience which kind of goes to one of the themes that we certainly already started to bring up and want to continue, but we have fantastic arts organizations here in Tucson, but sometimes it feels like we aren't talking to each other. How can we better, there's a lot of yes.
Yes.
Well, there's a lot of yes. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And that happens in Denver, but it's so easy to get siloed. You know, the
Yeah.
theater community here and the museum community. But what we've found, because this is a 7-county, it's from Boulder, Colorado, the university town, to southern ring communities on the way to Colorado Springs, not that far. But it's about collaboration. So we see a lot of cross-collaboration, between sectors, between industry sectors in the arts. But we also are seeing a lot more collaboration between what I refer to as arts and other. So arts in the military, arts and healing, arts and, prisons. Because there's such a great connection, because we know arts and immigrant issues. We know that the arts provide the link to a lot of that. I didn't totally answer it, but.
It's so important that we be having people understand the connectivity that the arts provide to strengthen the whole social fabric. And it makes it so much more valuable than the historical way that the arts were ghettoized and put over here.
But I mean, this sounds great, but I mean, can you give me an example? Because I mean, everybody knows how hard collaboration is a great idea.
Yeah.
But it's hard, right? We know it in every area.
Yeah.
So can you give us a concrete example of either something that failed or something that actually succeeded?
Well, I'll start with a success. We started with a very small program about 6 years ago called Creative Aging. And it started working with able-bodied adults in free creative aging classes, and also an adult daycare for severe dementia patients. And it was, first of all, it was so successful that what was once Serine Adult Daycare has now totally changed their brand and program, and they've become Oakwood Creative Care, because now their entire program is focused on using the arts with their clients. And that got us recognition that enabled us to get a national grant to start a new program for low to moderate dementia, people suffering from low to moderate dementia and their caregivers together, because we had done caregiver workshops, and the results and the need for caregivers to have the benefit of the arts was so obvious that we saw that we needed to expand that programming for the dementia patients with their caregivers. And as a result, we've gotten interest from other funders in that program.
How long did it take you to get to this point? Because you've had some failures along the way, right?
The first vote was in '88.
Yeah.
And, you know, Denver was kind of a one-industry town in the '80s. The recession tanked. It was all oil and gas. The Saudis dropped the price of oil. We had out migration for the first time in years. So it was a different time. And a group of trustees, mostly of the large anchor institutions, came together with political will. They tried to pass it just amongst the 4 big anchor institutions. And the other organization said, no, this isn't going to work. The elected officials were pissed off. And so they had to go back, and they brought in other suburban and smaller organizations. So the point is, you've got to keep trying, and you got to keep talking. And so finally at '88 it passed. And I would say one thing that needs to be improved on is every year, every 10 years, we have to ramp up on a huge campaign, and then things slow down and people don't think about the SCFD. So I'd say you've got to keep your messaging out there all the time.
And where is your biggest failure of collaboration? I mean, what happens that makes it not work? You know, to help us think about how we could get past it.
I think that sometimes it's an economy of scale issue. You have multi-million-dollar organizations that want to work with smaller organizations, but there is a disparity. And so I think it's a constant evaluation of who's really helping whom. And so I'm really interested in how we can look at capacity building for smaller organizations and working with larger organizations. We do have one collaborative process that I think is important. It's 27 organizations, the ballets and the opera companies, the mid-size. They pay in. And so it's also, the organizations have to have some skin in the game. They pay a membership fee and they have a joint database, they do joint education projects. So it's put them in a situation where they work together, but they also have to pay into it. It's kind of that skin in the game.
So it's an organized system to make people talk to each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, note that, okay?
Yeah, it's not organic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can think of any number of projects where every partner did not adequately pull their weight. And I think what we've learned from that is that you have to spend more time in the planning up front and the getting to know your partners and trying to really make smart choices. We have a little mantra we picked up at the what used to be the Guild of Community Schools summit years ago, which is work with the willing. And so really finding the people who really want the partnership, and everybody has an equitable piece to bring to the partnership, and the roles are very clearly defined so that you can have a better chance of success.
Yeah.
You're always going to find disparities sometimes.
Yeah.
You can't hit it 100%.
I've got another question from the audience here. As outsiders, what do you know or what have you heard about Tucson arts? And based on that, what kind of advice would you offer our arts community? You want to go first, Deborah?
Well, first I've heard a lot of a lot of the organizations, what they're doing in terms of the relationship to Mexico and the immigrant issues and the border. I think that's really interesting, given the location. I think, like Denver in a way, arts are scrappy, and I mean that in the best way. They're entrepreneurial, and so keep doing that. There were a couple of young women on the video that just, you just do things. And so I'm from the West. I've lived in Europe and all over, but I love the West because there's an expansive spirit to what you all do here, and I think we do in Denver, larger city, that you just try things. And I just say go for it.
Yeah, well, being only 2 hours north, I know probably more about Tucson than Deborah. I'm aware of the wonderful development that's been occurring within the arts community, and it actually reflects, to me, a lot of what we've been doing in Mesa. So I was thinking hard about what might be the things that I could bring to the table. I think there are two things that have been very helpful to us. One is piloting. So if you have an idea for something and maybe the full funding isn't in place or the infrastructure is not there, trying something in a small way, putting your foot in the water to get people excited about an idea so that the investment is not as big, but people start seeing that exciting new things are bubbling up. And that's a good way to get a sense of what's really going to stick and what the community wants. And in that process, engage the community at the outset in participating and saying what they want and saying how they want it done. Don't create something and expect people to come. Get the community to own it from the beginning. And then the second thing is really picking up off your quote from Picasso. I think you really should be very, very willing to steal, borrow, emulate. I think it's important to get out there and visit other places around the country and see where there are really exciting new things being done, and that might be a good fit for your community. We've now done 2 big projects that have been done in other cities that were very instrumental in changing the nature of the way people viewed Mesa. It used to be viewed as kind of a conservative, boring place. And some of these big projects like Street Pianos or our Main Street Prototyping Festival, which was based on and inspired by the Market Street Prototyping Festival in San Francisco, were the kinds of things that we did them. The community loved them and was engaged in making them happen. But also, there were plenty of people who said, that's happening in Mesa? And that was exactly what we wanted.
Well, so just in our last minute or so here, so you're something they can steal from you if it's a question of, oh, I don't know, fiefdoms, that don't talk to each other, or are that competing for the same dollars, especially small versus large organizations? What's the takeaway?
I think get out of your food group. We talk about community, but really think about how, don't just talk to the arts community, talk to making sure you're hammering on well, we love the elected officials, work with the elected officials, work with the business community, and really think about, what we think about and as a challenge, how to create a much more equitable and diverse cultural community.
Well, I would certainly echo the cross-sector collaborations. I think they're essential to building a broad support for the arts. But I also think looking for a way to connect and empower your core arts activists to work together. What we did was we went after some grant funding so that we could ask these young arts activists to dream about the creative community they wanted, and we could give them some small resources to help them do it. And that has really made a difference.
Cindy Ornstein and Deborah Jordy, thank you both for joining us.
Thank
tonight.
you.
Okay, now it's time to go to our next poll, so please get out your phones once again. Here's the next question. Are enough arts and cultural experiences in Southern Arizona personally relevant to you? Yes or no? And you know what to do. Select your answer and click on Submit. Submit. You will submit. While you're doing that, we'll take a bit of a break. Let's check back in with Mark McLemore out in the courtyard. Mark?
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. I know that as a journalist and as a broadcaster and tonight as a host, that you very much understand the importance of words. And as a poet, you also understand their beauty and their higher function. Joining us now, poet Raquel Gutierrez, who comes to Tucson from Los Angeles to get her MFA at the University of Arizona, and now she will read for us.
Hello. This poem is called The Poet Things Again. I am a poet, and I do poet things. I don't see boundaries. I burn my fingers again, lighting the match, a blackened fuse that sets the whole sky on fire. I only creep into collision, a compulsory attempt at running away from evading cameras. Decoder, step back now. I had slathered the paint on my face in order to hide from computers. Decoder on my face against the cowardice on camera. The patterns I applied were important to the pixel calculating machinations of facial recognition algorithms. I transformed my face into a mess of unremarkable pixels. Don't be a bummer, babe. Surrender to the last call as energy drunks high-five me all the way home. I beat it, and the computer's vision, my face, cause a momentary burst of confusion. Clock out, dog tired before I began to live. I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. Sight you silent in the moonrise. I plan my own accountability while I trespass against you. You don't like boundaries either. What if I stepped into a role of passionate asphodel, risking life on the daily, flirting with contiguous prismatic disaster? A boner mixed in company, a monkey puncturing beach balls off the seal's snout, balancing act like you were raised with some manners. I see your tricks in the parlor. Forget that exhibition World's Fair dinner party where you serve melon balled into fists of prosciutto fury, knowing full well a taste of home could signal staying versus dying in the continental concentration, where we give up cloud spotting for serious world views and upend having to choose the undialectical when we haven't earned our voice yet. Shaky-handed slumber to overdose on Spanish borders so the French could cross undeterred as a way to not deal with any more death on their hands. I send signals, I send barbs, I send direct messages too, messenger femmes galore. Nothing quite subtle about my communication with you, but the sun is a lot to block out now, or it can be by the multiple ways we stand just to stare at it, knowing full well we are hurting ourselves again. Thank you.
I don't know what Tucson's going to be like in the next 10 years involving art. I don't think Tucson wants to be a big city yet.
People are talking about Tucson, people are coming here, people are moving back here that left and went to Seattle or Portland or Austin. So it's a great time to be here.
Tucson definitely will get to a place where it's nationally recognized for its arts and culture specifically.
Creative thinking, out of the box, ways of developing partnerships with our city and our county would help me tremendously. And funding. Of course, funding, always funding.
How does the symphony build a relationship with the food bank that makes sense? How do we inspire people to be more community-minded through symphonic music? It's a great challenge that the arts has ahead of them, is how do we integrate this into our communities? I do believe the arts community is the one with the answer, because we are the creative thinkers.
Collaboration from a business perspective, or the perspective of can arts groups combine efforts and do joint marketing, or can they combine efforts and have the back of the house accounting shared so that there's only one accountant instead of 5 accountants for 5 arts groups?
There is a lot of collaboration here. This is a town where artists support other artists. They go to their openings. It's not a competition.
I would like to and hope that everyone here that lives in a community this beautiful, that has access to the arts and culture that we do have today, would recognize it and realize that it is something that needs to be maintained and grown together. We can't rely on 10 philanthropists in Tucson. We have to rely on hundreds of thousands of people doing small things to make big impact.
If you like what you see and you like what you hear, support it.
I have to say it's really nice to end a live discussion and go to live poetry. I want to do that on the NewsHour every night. Wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't that be nice? You know, here's a tweet from our president, and here's a poem. So, all right. So I didn't say it. I didn't say that. Before we meet our panel, let's look at how you answered that last poll. Are enough arts and cultural experiences in Southern Arizona personally relevant to you? Yes or no? And the good news is 81% of you say yes, and the bad news is that there are 19% of you out there who are not finding the experiences culturally or personally relevant. So you guys have to work on that 19%, right? Okay, so with me on the stage are 4 people who in just the past few years joined Tucson's creative community as leaders of various arts organizations. Their leadership will help define the future of arts and culture in Southern Arizona. David Ivers became artistic director of Arizona Theater Company just 6 months ago after 20 seasons with the Utah Shakespeare Festival. His tenure there was marked by a significant rebrand of the organization and several key initiatives. And I should say thank you for letting us use your stage, too.
Our pleasure.
Ginger Schulich Porcella accepted the position of executive director and chief curator of the Museum of Contemporary Art Tucson less than a year ago. She most recently served as executive director and chief curator of the San Diego Art Institute.
Thank you.
Jeremy Mikolajczak,
you got it,
getting the award for hardest name, Chief Executive Officer of the Tucson Museum of Art and Historic Block. Since joining it in March of 2016, he's led transformational change at TMA. And we're welcoming back to the stage Mark David Penate, the producing artistic director of the Borderlands Theater. So, because you're all new here, I mean, one of the things that just came up, I'll ask you, was how did you see Tucson before you came here? And what did you find when you got here? David?
I found that incredible food that's been spoken of. The first time I came to visit was in the spring of last year. And I saw light that I'd never seen before. And I saw a citizenry that was curious. And curious inside of, for me, all the right things. Education, the way arts intersects with community, the way food speaks to wonder, and music, and all those things opened my eyes a bit.
Ginger, how much did you know, first of all? And what did you know, or what were your impressions?
I had spent some time here over the years. I had some family here, so it was not totally unfamiliar to me, though the arts and culture scene was pretty new to me. What I saw was a lot of potential, a really great location, a beautiful landscape. I wake up every day and think, wow, I'm in the most beautiful place in the world. Yeah. And like David said, I saw a community that was really hungry for good, critical, contemporary art.
You know, one of the things that we just heard in that video was the man saying, "I don't think Tucson wants to be a big city." Interesting. Yeah. Jeremy, what did you find? Do you find that? How do you respond to a comment like that?
Absolutely, and I agree wholeheartedly with Ginger. I saw possibility and change, and one of the things that always sort of kind of challenged me when I first got here was that everyone kept saying, "Oh, we're the best kept secret," and I thought that's a problem. That's not a positive.
That's not a good thing.
That's a challenge. And so what was there was this amazing opportunity to work with a community that had so much potential that wasn't just within this particular sort of geographic, but you're looking at throughout southern Arizona.
Yeah.
So there's this diverse community that existed all throughout the region that you had these great constituents to work with. Unlike anywhere else in the country, you have this wonderful border dialogue that's going on. And you know, what an opportunity as an arts leader to have that chance to work with those communities. So it was transformational.
So Mark, I mean, you started to answer this in our first panel, but what you found, and specifically to that, I don't think Tucson wants to be a big city, that sense of itself. Do you find that?
Oh, totally, right? I mean, we have the I-10 freeway, and that's it, you know. And I mean, that's part of that is on purpose, right? That sucks when you're trying to travel east-west, but I like that. You know, I like that there's space, right? That you can see the sky, and I think also that its proximity to the border. It's in, you know, wall or no wall. It's a very porous culturally, and it has been for hundreds of years, and that's still so like that bicultural mix of border life is great.
Jeremy, let me ask you something about because we were talking earlier about the silos.
Absolutely.
You found that when you came here?
Absolutely. I think the arts organizations, cultural organizations, we're working within silos, and I think for us to progress to the future as a region, these partnerships need to happen. You know,
but before you get to what needs to happen, I mean, be concrete about what are the silos. I mean, how does it impact your day-to-day life?
Well, I think number one is that, you know, there was no communication between organizations themselves. You know, I didn't know what was happening at MOC. I had very little to know what was happening at ATC, and you know, that's a problem. That's a really big problem for a community of our size, where we have to work collectively together to build this environment. And also, too, I came from, you know, Miami-Dade County, which, of course, is like the Maricopa County of Florida, whereas all your arts funding, majority of your sort of focus is centered around this one city and this one county, and sort of how do we work together, and how do we change that perspective so that, you know, when the NEA is coming down to survey the land, they're coming to Tucson, and they're making sure that they're getting into these cultural organizations that are doing amazing work across the board, no matter how big or small.
Well, Ginger, how did that affect you, that kind of siloing, when it comes to walking into a new organization and try to take it to the next step?
Well, for me, it really is about creating those relationships and those meaningful partnerships and collaborations. And everywhere I go, it's really about getting to know the community, the wants and needs of that community, and addressing them through our programming. And we can't do that without collaborating with our partnering organizations here in town. We're a small organization, but we do programming that is very impactful and that reaches a wider number of people than I think most people would think for an organization our size, and we can only do that with collaborations.
What's the biggest challenge when it comes to trying to do that?
Well, I think you shouldn't try to do them, right? They can't be
Shouldn't
forced collaborations.
but that's, if you don't try, is it going to happen? I mean, I get that you can't
Yeah.
force it, but so what's the happy medium to make it happen?
Well, I think it's finding other organizations that share your values, that mirror your mission, but that are going about that in a different way. So not necessarily partnering with visual arts organizations, partnering with performing arts organizations, and even partnering with corporate sponsors or partnering with small community organizations. I think that's really important.
What have you, David, coming back to the funding issues, it's a challenge.
It's always a challenge.
It's always
Yeah.
a challenge.
Yeah.
So what are the specific challenges here as opposed to where you were, and how are you trying to deal with them?
I mean, I'm still learning a lot about the citizenry, but I will say the theater I helped run before was what we call a destination theater. So like the Oregon Shakespeare Festival or the Shaw Festival or Stratford, most of the audiences come from outside 150 miles,
Yeah.
right? So it's a cultural gem and part of a vacation experience. And one of the reasons I left was because I wanted to live in the community I serve. And this affords that opportunity that I didn't have before, and I want my children to see the effects of the work we do and how that ripples across our community as an arts leader among this distinguished panel. And but what I'm learning about funding in Tucson, and everyone knows it, but the key is still you have to ask.
Absolutely.
Am I right?
Yeah.
When you don't ask, nobody gives. And so I have right now the benefit of sort of blind passion and some rose-colored glasses, but I also understand that we may not want to be a big city, but we want to be a grown-up city.
Yeah.
And we want to have a complex and literate citizenry. And the key to fundraising for me is how the work we do on our stages or on our walls or on the oral landscape of our arts institution connects to the heart of vision. We don't fundraise to crisis anymore. We fundraise forward. What do you want to invest in? How does the art reflect the whole of our community? And who's been, kind of set aside? I will say that at my job running a Shakespeare festival, I used to say to the board often when we'd come up against a tricky title that everyone wants to see, like Henry VI Part 2.
Right.
A great seller.
My favorite.
Top 10 hit. But I used to say, this theater hasn't produced it in 23 years, so how do you know it's not a hit?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there are themes in it.
And they actually believed you.
Well, no, but actually, they didn't believe me. But we did have a pretty large success with Titus Andronicus that we hadn't produced in 20 years because the last time we produced it, Johnny was 6 and now he's 26 and he's never seen it in his lifetime. And we just stop answering those questions because we think, oh, no one will see this. This doesn't apply anymore. Well, that's not vision.
I wonder if did you hear things from our last panel about, Jeremy, you could start on this, just from, a city like Denver, which is a big city with a huge, there was big numbers she was talking about, way bigger than you deal with here. Right?
Sure.
You're laughing, yeah, way bigger. So did you hear some ideas?
It's funny because I don't think any director would sit up here and say, I'm so flush with cash. I don't need any more money. I don't need anything here. It's just, we're always constantly raising money. And it's interesting too with Tucson, which it's such a unique city in itself because this city is a homegrown city. It's always been the citizens that have kept the arts and culture alive. Randy and, yes, thank you. Randy and Fletcher talked a little bit about that in the first go-around, that, not one organization here is a municipally funded organization. It's always been the private citizens that have kept it going. And even too, the roots have been always interconnected. TMA in its early days were part of, the ATC, and our first venue was actually right outside these walls. So there's always been this level of private sort of funding of what's happening. And it sort of puts us at the forefront because as we're starting to see across the lay of the land, municipal funding is getting less and less. And so we're kind of at a unique juncture where we're way advanced in the future, in front of all these other cities like Denver and like Austin. And we're really building it on our own. And it's challenging. I mean, because for us, we operate every dollar that we need to spend to keep our doors open, to keep our lights on, to keep our musicians paid. But it creates some unique challenges. And I think if you take sort of the idea of the challenges of fundraising out of fundraising and make it more about, as Dave was saying, the investment in the arts, that's where it's at. And that's where we need to be.
But I'm wondering.
One person agrees.
Go ahead, I don't want to stop applause.
That's the 1 millionaire.
Right. Could you please come forward as soon as we're finished, right? What was I going to ask now? Well, no, I was thinking, though, about is it conceivable to share? I mean, Mark, you could maybe, if you think about collaboration, could you share publicity? Could you share marketing? Could you share administrative? Or is that just...
I think that's totally a way to look at the situation. I mean, for us, we're so small, we have 2 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff, and that's our entire organization, right? There's other organizations, other institutions that have been around a long time that have full staffs, and it's like maybe we could partner with them. There's something that we bring as a very culturally relevant arts organization that not a lot of people can replicate, right? But there's a certain kind of stability, institutional stability that other groups have that we just can't with the numbers that we're at, right? And merging those two, those big organizations or bigger organizations are looking for more culturally relevant work to diversify their audiences. Well, we can do that, So it may be a way to bring those two together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ginger? Can you see something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most of the successful collaborations are sharing all of those resources. It's not just collaborating on programming, it's collaborating on funding, on budgeting, on marketing, on audiences and outreach, because I think that's the best thing about collaboration is that you're basically doubling your audience. People that may not come to the Museum of Contemporary Art but might go to a Borderlands Theater project, for example. I think that there's a lot to be said for that sort of cross audience collaboration.
And I think that goes back to that sort of silo conversation. I mean, I think we collectively as a group, we want all our donors. We share all our donors. We're not naive to the sense that, many of the big donors here support all organizations. And we want that. I want, TMA members to be great theater, patrons. I want them to be great symphony patrons. I want them to be great experimental theater. It makes a better, well-rounded individual, in a cultural community and a patronage that's going to support all levels. So, I mean, I think that's something that I think collectively, that's an area where we could definitely start working together.
Is there some umbrella already existing under which you would join, or is that something you'd have to create? I don't know the answer, so I'm wondering.
I mean, there is a group here called Nachos, which is the Nature, Arts, Culture, Heritage Organizations, which is sort of I know, it's a mouthful, It's about as bad as my last name. But I think there's a good collective group of individuals here who are really trying to get this off the ground and really trying to change the conversation. And it doesn't just start, because we're talking as organizations, but we also need our patrons and our constituents talking as well and supporting them. It's not an us versus them scenario. This is something where we've got to collectively come together and really build this region.
How much, we haven't talked explicitly about politics much here tonight, but I'm wondering about, I'm just wondering about how that plays into the issues we're talking about, whether it's programming or funding. The politics of the region, when you're thinking about what you're going to program or what kind of art exhibitions you're going to have, and you're also very much aware of the need for the audience, but also of the funding. You want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still learning that part of the culture here, the landscape. I mean, I moved here about 6 months ago. I've been gone for 2.5 of that, finishing up projects that I had previously committed to. But I will say I'm more interested in the communities in Arizona as it relates to how they receive work, political or not. That for me, a well-made play, a well-made piece of programming that holds great literature at its heart will address that inherently, and then becomes a reflective lens for people to decide whether it pushed a nerve or not. And that to me is partly what's great about at least the work in the performing arts, is that not everything has to be on the nose. Some of it needs to be, to exercise its interpretive muscle, politically or otherwise. So, that's kind of sort of my way in right now so far.
Andrew, how do you
I mean, we're a contemporary art museum, so we are going to do shows and programming that, reflects the world that we live in, which is a very, we live in very difficult times, and I don't think most institutions, museums, contemporary art museums or otherwise can afford to be apolitical in the times that we live in. But there's, a fine line of, balancing the programming that we think is important and that speaks to our constituents and speaks to the problems of today. We want to present programming that's forward-thinking and that hopefully allows people to solve the problems of today and tomorrow through the lens of contemporary art. Yeah, but I think that's the great thing about being a contemporary art museum. I think that we can push the boundaries a little bit more than some other spaces can.
I've got a question from the audience, which goes to the community that you've all stepped into. The overwhelming majority of governance and leadership roles in arts organizations is white and wealthy. Why aren't you making room at the table? Who wants to start? I see a lot of nodding. Yeah. Jeremy, you were nodding the most fervently.
Sure, I'll take it. No, it is a challenge. It's a big challenge. But also, too, I think for the financial obligations to many of our organizations, that's also a challenge as well. And it's just really about reframing the structures of our boards and how we allow invitations to those individuals to really come in and start being a voice. And how do we, one of the big challenges that when I took over at TMA is that we really questioned ourselves, how do we reflect this community? How do we serve this community? And, the board is going to be the last of that to sort of change because it takes time. This is something that just doesn't happen on a dime. But I think there's got to be inroads in terms of how we structure boards. They can't be done in sort of the classic sense. We've got to look at new models in other cities that have advisory committees and have other inroads into the organizations. And, they need to be having conversations with staff. They need to be having conversations with constituents as far as how do we continue to increase those opportunities. And it's an ongoing challenge, and it's going to remain an ongoing challenge unless we really change the traditional board structure.
Yeah. Mark, do you have a comment on that?
Well, I mean, I think that, I see a lot of, like in the theater community, there's a lot of discussion of diversity, inclusion, equity. I went to the last TCG conference, and like most of the panels were all about that. Now, I don't get a lot out of those panels because like most of the people on my staff look like me. Same thing with the board. Same thing with like the people the artists that we hire, right? So like, but so the converse of that, right, is that I come from a working class background. I don't have a connection to wealth, right? I don't have those connections, people in the business, an uncle, or, I'm the first person in my family to venture into this area. And you see these programs where these big institutions get like $1 million to diversify, and the first thing they do, well, we're going to hire these people, and the first year we're going to do surveys, and we're going to and figure out the problem. I mean, but we know the problem, and there's... And I just think that, there's organizations like ours and other organizations all over the country that have been going strong 30, 40, 50 years and are still small because they're organizations of color. But we have a certain expertise, but we're never going to get the $1 million to, expand what we already do well, right? And so we have to figure that gap out and figure out how to put those two together.
I got one more question here. Do you think it's possible to raise enough capital here in Tucson to form an arts center, including services to support artists in all aspects of their business? Is there enough capital for each of you and to do put it all together? Ginger?
Oh, great. Thanks. I don't know about here in Tucson. I'd like to be hopeful and say perhaps. But I think, and we've heard this from the other panels, we really have to look outside the city for diversifying our funding sources. I think there's a lot of potential to provide more resources to artists, financially, institutionally, and through the space that's available here in Tucson. There's a lot of available space for creation. So I'm going to tentatively say yes, and I will support that organization when it comes about.
Did you come in with one big idea for transforming this place that you are selling to the community?
Engagement.
Yeah.
How we connect with our citizenry. What our citizenry actually looks like and not what I look like. And how, which I said earlier, vision, and a bit of risk and virtuosity is the thing for me that has quality behind it that people recognize and support, And I don't think anyone here, we're all here within the last few years, is here because we felt like we weren't willing to take the risk to be at what we all recognize as a city and a region that is about to have its sort of naissance of, its next kind of awareness. And so at the center of it for me all along from the first interview was I believe in fundraising. I believe that as the lead singer of the band, I got to ask. And I believe that that is connected to the vision for the organization, which we know internally what it is going forward. And you'll see that February 12th when we announce next season, which will be a change for the organization, but also an embracing of legacy. So, I think it's about people recognize good work.
Yeah.
And people support it. When it's off the charts quality, people come. It doesn't matter who's on this stage and what community is reflected. The work has to be stunning. And this is a city that understands that word. So that's where we go.
Okay. Why don't we'll let that stand. And since this is your theater, we'll give you you got the shot to announce your next season, too. All right, David Ivers, Jeremy Mikulášek, Zach, Ginger Schulich, Porcella, Mark David Penate. Thank you all for your very helpful ideas. And we're going to conclude tonight with, of course, one more poll, a final poll. Please take out your phone and go to slido.com one last time and tell us, going forward, what do you see yourself doing to support the arts? Check all that apply. This is like the envelope at the end of the night. 1, creating art. 2, volunteering for arts organizations. 3, attending events, museum shows, and other things. 4, advocating for the arts to your elected officials. 5, donating. 6, voting for public funding. The results are live on your phone and on the screen here. And let me look and see what we're getting here. Well, 89%, 90% are taking the we will attend events, good. 79% are voting for more public funding. 61% of you are donating, that's good. 54 advocating. 52 volunteering, we just went down to 51. Who dropped out?
Just
That's
kidding.
what happens with a lot. You? That was you? And 39% creating art. Any other creators? Okay, we'll leave it there. So that brings to a close Community Interactive, the Arts, a conversation on art and culture in Southern Arizona. We hope it encourages an ongoing conversation on this important issue. Thank you to all of our panelists. A big thank you to the staff of the Arizona Theater Company here at the lovely Temple of Music and Art.
and to those of you in the audience and watching on live stream. And my own personal thanks to all of you and to everyone at AZPM for inviting me here and for your generous hospitality and the great work that went into this. Don't go away for a moment. We have one last live performance in the courtyard. But for now, on behalf of Arizona Public Media and the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona, I'm Jeffrey Brown of the PBS NewsHour. Thank you so much and good night. Thank you.
We'd like to thank you for making your voice heard through the various polls that we conducted tonight, and we learned a lot about the Tucson arts community and where it can go in the future. Coming up next, we're going to end the event tonight, and as you're coming out of the theater, please join us outside on the courtyard to listen to a young man who grew up here in Tucson, nurtured and fed by the arts community here, getting his education in arts here, and now continuing it by spreading his love of music and his enthusiasm for playing, which is so vast it cannot be contained by any one group or organization. Tonight, he's here playing with Mona Chambers on cello and Vicki Brown on violin. I'm talking about Brian Lopez. Here he comes.
I'm a thread on a wire, I'm a thorn without a rose. I'm the spark that started the fire in a place nobody knows. But when I fall in love and the patterns of the world make a colorful burst.
Community Interactive, the Arts, a conversation on art and culture in Southern Arizona, was made possible by the generous support of the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona, the Community Service Grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the members of Arizona Public Media.
Como un ciervo que se pierde cuando el sol se va a ocultar, en el día del ocaso que ya nunca volverá, como un pájaro entre sombras que aquel bosque llenará, a la luz de las estrellas con sus sueños volará. Así quiero creer que con el día llegarás, como agua de rocío entre mis manos quedarás. Así quiero creer que con el día llegarás aquí.